All right. Well, once again, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. It is my pleasure to have on the line with me today. I guess you should put our names up here. Me and Dan Mori, who is the founder of Staffing Mastery, also owner of a staffing agency, also head of the NISA, National Independent Staffing Association. Did I get that all right? Or Alliance? I always forget the A.
Association. But
All
yeah,
right.
I do a lot. It's easy to get tongue twisted when describing me.
So we wanted to kick off 2025 with a talk on sales because we know it's been a big issue for the last year. We know it's going to continue to be a challenge, at least for part of this year. Hopefully, it'll get easier again. And wanted to have somebody we could bring into Lunch with Haley who could share some amazing perspective, amazing expertise, and perfect timing is actually going to have a really cool event coming up in February all about sales. So, Dan, I gave a quick intro, but if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it short because we've got a lot of nuggets to drop here. So if you don't know me, I am the founder of Staffing Mastery, which helps staffing agency owners and executive leaders really put the systems in place they need to kind of grow and scale their business. And where everything was developed was in the trenches of being an owner operator in the staffing space. So I've certainly commiserated with a lot of you. And through all of this, we recognize that sales is a big challenge. Last year, it's continuing to this year. And that's why we did create the Staffing Sales Summit, which is just exclusively focused on teaching the techniques that are working today to help you grow and achieve your goals this year. So that's a little bit about me, David. Thank you.
All right, well, let's get kicked off right away. And this is our slide that's called Lots of Opinion and Read the Crystal Ball. So, Dan, what are you forecasting? What are you expecting this year?
Yeah, so I love this. I'm going to be just bold and say it's going to be a growth year. Those that actually focus on growth and they lean into it, they will grow. I think there's actually a chance that we can outpace the predictions of like 4% growth on the year. But it's not going to start out that way. Things are going to be a little bit turbulent through Q1. The administration change, things are going to be happening really, really fast. It's still going to leave a lot of uncertainty. People aren't going to know what's going on, how to respond in the market. But really, by the end of Q1, we're going to know what we have. We're going to know what the next several years hold. So people will start to settle down. But I think by mid-year, we're going to be catching a really good stride in this industry. And you're going to see kind of the wind at our back, which will help out with some of the sales stuff that we're doing, which kind of tees up the pre-work that you need to do over the next 3 months to make sure you can capitalize on that tailwind that we'll see in the second half of the year. But I think most agencies have the opportunity to finish up.
All right. Well, damn, I can't believe you made me be the pessimist. So,
Good
I
cop, bad
actually,
cop. What are we doing?
I'm more of a cautious optimist. So, I was really excited for November 6th. Not that I had a strong opinion about who was going to win, but what I was really hoping for and knew we would get is clarity. We knew who was going to be president. We knew, and it doesn't matter if you're right or left. The markets, business hates uncertainty. So having certainty was going to help the markets. And I've got some friends in the M&A world who said there was just a tidal wave of cash waiting until November 6th to come into the market. And they're anticipating it's going to be a big year for M&A. Big year for M&A is good because it drives lots of business activity, which of course drives lots of needs for people. So that's all real positive and optimistic. My pessimism comes from the intended policies of trade wars and immigration cuts, because immigration cuts could go either way for the staffing industry. It could create more demand for blue collar labor if there's a ousting of a lot of people who may be working illegally or may not have good documentation for what they're doing. I'm not sure how that's going to play out for the staffing industry, but the trade wars concern me. We know what supply chain issues felt like a couple of years ago, and I really don't want to see that come back. So I know SIA is forecasting 5% growth. That would be okay. And I'm gonna try to jump on board with you here and say, let's push hard in the first half of this year to guarantee a strong second half, regardless of what the economy does, because everyone listening in today, it really doesn't matter what the whole economy does. You can win your local market. So we're going to talk about how to do that. And we're going to get into now some sales strategies. And at a high level, we're looking at a bunch of different things. How do you improve your sales process? How do you improve the tools? How do you improve the training? Dan, if you looked in aggregate across all of the companies you advise, where do you think the biggest deficiency is? Is it in how they're going after the market, their process? Is it the tools they're using or the training of their teams?
Yes. Um, so I think the biggest deficiency right now it's actually a two-pronged area. The first and foremost, I think a lot of agencies over the past several years have sort of lost their way with understanding what their unique value proposition is. I know you and I have talked a lot about this lately, and that's really what the market buys from us. That's what's unique to your agency that you kind of do better than anybody else and is also valuable to the customer that you're selling it to. So I feel like we lost our way there. And when we're not rock solid on what that UVP is, we start selling generically, right? And when you sell generically, you open the door to commoditization and price comparison and competition, but you also bring in orders that really aren't aligned with what your UVP is, and you start actually setting your recruiting team up for not success, for failure, right? And then your performance metrics will start to take a dip, then your customer service takes a dip, and it's a cycle. So losing sight of your UVP is like really your North Star. And I think that we lost sight of that. And it's basically handcuffed the sales team to not really know what they're selling. And then the other side of that really is the process needs to be revised, right? Like we're back in the olden days when I got in this industry, the sales process was it started by picking up the phone, right? Or applying to a help wanted ad, trying to get a meeting, pitch your service, get a contract or not, right? Like that was the cycle. Well, now the sales cycle has been expanded dramatically to include a lot of upstream stuff that happens in social selling and marketing and funnels and all of this stuff that influences the buyer's process downstream where the sales process lives. And we're not doing that very well. So those are the two things, those are the two biggest disconnects that I think if agencies can get fixed going into this year, they will be able to capitalize on it. And I'm still optimistic that they can outpace that 4 to 5% forecast.
Yeah, and I want to give you a plug here because I've been liberally ripping off one of your best ideas, not taking claim as my own, but sharing that you provided it. And when you talk about that unique value proposition, the UVP, one of the things we see a lot of companies wanting to do is make that value proposition about their service delivery. Here's how we're better access to talent, better screening, better speed. Those are all wonderful things. But one of the things I heard Dan say that just resonated with me was that in staffing or basically in any service business, it's super hard to differentiate on service because you're making claims about something people have not yet experienced, and they're going to take all those claims with a grain of salt or worse.
Yeah.
They're really skeptical. But what you can truly differentiate on is your sales experience. What's it like working with your company during the sales process? And is it dramatically, remarkably, somehow different than what it's like when your competitors are knocking on doors? And as you're going through the ideas we're going to share in this presentation, be thinking about how does it apply to our sales experience? Because if we differentiate, then it's so much easier to win the sale, and then people will get to see how good your service is. So thank you for letting me steal that idea.
Hey, man, you can use that royalty free, my friend.
All right. So we want to kick off the implementation tactics here with 6 sales strategies for growth. And so, Dan, I'll tee these up and then we can talk about each one of them. First one is the one that I think sometimes gets overlooked or taken for granted, which is your current clients. We ask a lot of current clients, are you good with retention? The answer is 100% yes. We hardly ever lose clients. If you ask them if they're good with upselling, the answer is usually, yeah, we're pretty good at that. If you ask them about cross-selling, then we start to hear some struggles of, yeah, we did light industrial staffing and they had no idea that we could do accounting and finance. And there's actually some really powerful marketing reasons why it's hard to cross-sell. But Dan, let's talk a little bit about this strategy. What do you see companies need to do a better job with current clients?
Yeah. So the first thing I want everybody to know, and this is spoken from a salesperson at heart, it is way easier to keep and grow an existing client than it is to go get a new client, right? So if you put the same amount of effort into getting and keeping your client as you do to getting new clients, I guarantee you getting or keeping and growing will outpace the getting every day of the week, right? So that's why this is so important to do this, but it's not just the service delivery. If you focus only on the service delivery to keep your clients happy and growing, that's a little bit too passive organic. And it's honestly putting too much on the plate of the recruiters to do that, that already have an important job. So you have to look at these three key areas of upsell, cross-sell, and retain, right? And there should be sort of a mini strategy for each one. And just to kind of break down some of the any barriers that might exist with this, of maybe understanding what we're talking about, I want to talk about like really what upselling means, what cross-selling means, and give some examples, and then really what the retention strategy is, right? So when it comes to upselling, all this means is you're asking for more business from your client, right? This is getting more business from your client, sort of in the same vertical that you're servicing, right? So if you place warehouse workers, you want more warehouse workers, right? Like that's kind of upselling. And this is the first nugget that you're going to get. I call it the would you like fries with that technique. Literally every single time that you engage with a client, especially when they rave and they give you positive feedback about your service or somebody you sent or the interaction, whatever, ask them, are there any other orders I can help you fill? That needs to be the would you like fries with that moment. And if you're not familiar with it, go Google the revenue growth chart for McDonald's once they introduced that strategy of would you like fries with that, just asking people to buy fries every time they ordered a hamburger, right? It literally was exponential growth by having their frontline people, you know, their kind of drive-through attendants or counter service people would be our recruiters, but they had their frontline people take part in sales by asking, would you like fries with that? Another case study. I mean, this is not just exclusive to McDonald's. Southwest copied it. And I know they're not the most popular airline right now, so it goes back a little bit. But when they added this strategy, they added $100 million of revenue just by asking, would you like to upgrade your seat, right? Because they already had someone that committed to buy, which is the first hurdle you have to get. They already committed to buy from them. So asking them to buy something else or a little bit more for more value was an easier sell, right? So that's upselling. That's something you can do super easy that costs you no money to train your people to say, hey, every time you talk to a customer, ask them how the service was. If they say something good, but make sure, hey, are there any other orders I can help you fill, right?
Dan,
That's a really, really big one.
one I'll add to that is another easy question is, what would it take for us to be the first call? Because most of the people you're working with have multiple staffing vendors. They may put the calls out simultaneously. If they're using a VMS platform, they certainly are. But if they're not on a VMS platform, they have to choose which company they're going to dial first or which company they're going to send the email to. So you want to know what matters to those clients and what would make you the first call.
I love that question a lot. And it actually goes to something I was going to mention in the retain side. On the retain piece, and I'll come back to it in a second, but on the retain piece, you should have these annual reviews or QBRs. And then one of the questions you should ask is, how do I get more X percentage business than we had last year, right? Kind of leading to David's question, like, how do I do more business with you? If you ask the customer that, they will likely answer. And then you just have to follow through. So that's upselling, right? David, you got anything else to add on upsell before we jump
No,
in
we
a
can move
couple
on to
of the,
cross.
I love this, man. Cross-selling. Anyway, is actually, David, do we have chat open? Can people correspond via chat with us?
Yeah, I believe it's open. Let's.
Awesome. Hey, anyone that's on chat, just hit yes to see if we can make sure chat's working, because I love to engage with the audience as we do this here. Cool. So with this right now, when it comes to cross-selling, can anyone just guess? Throw this in chat. What do you think the number one reason is that your clients only use one line of business from you? They don't use your other services like you might like. Number one reason. These are some smart people right here. You know what? So this is it, and everyone's going to hate me, David. I'm going to get kicked off the webinar right now. There's so many, they don't know. They don't know. How crazy is it that there's all of these really smart people on this webinar that know the answer, that it's the clients that they don't know that they're aware of it? So what do you think that we need to do? You got to tell them, right? You have to tell them this. And I'm going to tell you a really, really funny story about this. And then I'll give you a couple practical nuggets. I'm sure David's got a couple as well, right? So I'll never forget this. When I was actually carrying the bag, right? And I knew my competitors, like I was that guy. I was in the market. I knew who my competitors, what they offered. I go into a client, and this is a large company, multiple sites throughout the country. And I asked for the business. I'm like, hey, can we do this? And one of the questions they asked, they said, hey, we do a lot of warehouse work, but we also need people to do non-commercial driving, right? Just kind of small trips around the facility. Can you do that? I'm like, yeah, why? And they're like, well, we don't think that our current supplier can do that. So if you can do both, that would be a lot easier for us. So we'll just give you all of it. And they would be our first call, right? I'm like, that sounds fantastic. I can absolutely do that. So we signed up the business. We became the primary vendor. The current incumbent became a secondary, the second call to it. But here's the kicker. I knew when they were asking me this, that that competitor absolutely did both. Like I knew it because I was in other markets with them when they were doing both those jobs. And because the competitor failed to educate the client that they could actually handle it, not only did they not access that part of the business, they actually lost 80% of what they had,
Wow.
right? And all it was is I said yes. So that's in that moment right there. But the biggest thing you need to do is educate. And the way that you do that is always be talking to your customers and saying, hey, are there any other roles you have open? Maybe not even in warehouse or in radiology or whatever your focus is. We do other stuff, you know, scout your clients' job boards, see what they're hiring for. And if one of them overlaps, just say, hey, I want to let you know that we also do that, right? That's one way. Then there's going to be some marketing stuff that you can do, which I'm going to tee up for David, but you should have some level of newsletter, some sort of educational content that you can send out in two different ways. Generally, right? Just kind of a general, kind of a state of the union type deal. And then also part of targeted awareness campaigns that you want to educate your customers that you do these other things. And it's so important to make sure that you actually have a call to action to get them to take action to learn more about it or maybe place that order with you. But David, I am sure that you've probably got way more to do or cover on like awareness campaigns that you can run.
Yeah, I'm just going to do one quick truism, and this is it's a positioning challenge, and we don't often think about it because we go to a customer and we sell them something. And if you think about even yourself as a buyer, when you buy a product or service from an organization, in your mind, that's what that company does. So when you need something else, even if it's just a different kind of staffing, you're actually not likely to think of the current vendor. And you may love the current vendor, but the reason you're not going to think of them is in your mind, you've associated them with something else. If you think about your brain as a bookshelf, that vendor owns a specific book on the shelf, but they don't own the book of the other job title. They don't own the book of the other plant. They don't own the book of the other department. And your salespeople's job is to figure out what does that org chart look like? How do we map it out? Where do we have relationships and who do we know and what do they know about us? So your recruiters, they know the jobs they're filling, they know the people they're working with, but they may not know the people in the other divisions, the other plants, the other roles. Salespeople's job is to build out that org chart and think about where are the relationships we need to create so we can educate, so we can inform people, hey, we're doing this already in this area of your company. We can also help in this other area and make it more efficient for you to buy from us, more efficient for you to get your staffing needs fulfilled. So I'll leave it at that kind of
I love it.
truism about
Actually, you know,
positioning.
man, you inspired me. Can I drop one more nugget? This is an actual technique that I've used so much.
Go ahead.
So if you're out there, another form of cross-selling is not just offering like more of your services, but also expanding geographically with your clients. As I mentioned, that one account where it had multiple locations around the country, once we get an account, we always identify which of our clients actually have multiple locations or single, right? The ones that have multiple, we absolutely map them out. And then we will look and then compare it against our UVP, our capabilities, and say which of these locations could we support. And then we are very targeted when we reach out to our point of contact and say, hey, I see that we service you in Tampa, and I also see that you've got a facility in Dallas. You know, could you introduce me to somebody out there and maybe we could actually start working with that facility, right? And you can cross sell that way. And it's actually a great way to expand into new markets. So that is one on the cross sell that it's a must. And again, all these things we're sharing right now are completely free to implement.
All right, should we move on to ideal number two? And folks, I think we're going to be here
Yes.
about 12 hours by the time we get through all these slides, but
Yes.
we just want to make sure we're giving you the best advice that we can. But let's go on to our next strategy. And strategy number two, this one's another one that seems obvious, but often doesn't get done. It's win back lost clients.
Yeah, this one right here, I hate to say this, but a lot of times people get so focused on just bringing in new stuff because That's the way we've always done it. It's always been like, go get new business, go get new business. We need new business. We need new business. I will promise you this. You're going to hear me say this a bunch of times. It is easier to grow and keep and retain existing business than it is to go get new business, right? So if you do not have a plan for winning back lost clients, you are missing out, right? Client retention is a thing. You should be monitoring it, and how much you retain your clients year to year and the margin that's associated with those clients will determine how fast you can scale your agency, right? So the only two things I'm going to share on this, and I know David's probably got the more tactical side of this, there should be two ways you're approaching this. There should be a separate newsletter that you send to existing, like old clients, right? Something that might be speaking to the messaging of them. And this is programmatic, right? This is all the time. You always want to be keeping on the radar with them, because one of the top reasons that they don't call you back after you've lost them, unless something egregious happened and the bridge was burned. But outside of that, it's because they forget about you, right? They just forgot you existed. They forgot that you used to solve their problems. So you have to stay in front of them programmatically, consistently, all the time. Monthly newsletter that's targeted specifically to that subset of audience is a great way to do it. However, you should also pair that with burst campaigns, meaning you should actually be looking at, you should have an SOP in your business that says, if my clients, my old clients get this far old, right? Maybe they're older than 6 months since you build with them, you add them to new prospecting campaigns and you put them with your sales rep and say, hey, reach out to these people. And there will be sort of a mini differentiation for how you reach out to an old client to sell them. They should have the kind of the knowledge of that, but that's what your salespeople should be doing. And if you just run that through, so every month you're like targeting a specific list of old clients as part of your targeted prospecting outreach for new business, on top of that programmatic newsletter that's targeting them, keeping them informed that you exist, you're going to do a lot better job of winning those lost clients back.
Yeah, I love that strategy. And I don't want to just say ditto, but the idea of having a nurture campaign with former clients where you have a track of content and then you're using an automation platform. And Dan, you mentioned it, like, automatically when a client gets to the point where we haven't sold them something in X months, then it should at minimum trigger the salesperson to reach out. But ideally, it's also going to trigger out some automated outreach to see, hey, any new needs? It's been a while since we spoke. And when you're doing that kind of nurturing, the other thing that's really important is be multidimensional, meaning don't just rely on the automation and emails to get that person's attention. Make sure the salesperson's picking up the phone. If you're in the area, use it as an excuse to drop by. And I would also recommend be just a fountain of ideas,
Yeah.
because your competitors that you may have lost to, maybe they're just filling job orders. But if you're showing people how to get better value out of their staffing services and you're constantly reminding them, hey, there are new and more creative ways to staff your business that will help drive your business goals, whether it's controlling costs or improving productivity or managing risk, you're positioning and reinforcing that you're thinking about the business use case, not just filling job orders, which gives them a reason to talk to you again. The other thing I would look at is setting, through various pieces of software, triggers. So if someone turns over in a job title, our sales team knows, because in the world of HR, there has been and there's going to be a lot more turnover this coming year. I follow a lot of recruiting newsletters, and one of my favorites is a guy named Hung Lee, and he was just talking about the talent acquisition departments are looking for significant cuts in people in 2025. Now they're looking at it because of AI, but that means there's less human beings helping them to make staffing decisions. You may have a brand new person to sell to this year. And so that's another reason to, as Dan said, treat them like a new prospect and get back out and re-engage those lost clients. All right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. David, how do you want to handle it? We just got a question about something. You want to tackle questions now or wait to the end?
If you see something you want to answer, jump right in. If
I'm gonna
not, remind us, we'll come back at the end.
I'm gonna answer this one just because I brought it up. I would feel awkward if I said something and didn't answer it. This is for Janine. She mentioned, like, what if your longtime client has now brought in a VMS? Okay. That's a real challenge. Like, that absolutely has happened, right? It is important to get out in front of it and basically work with your client and say, hey, we've worked with other VMSs. One of the biggest pitfalls you're going to want to avoid is letting them come between you and the direct relationship with your staffing partners, right? If they've actually not signed the contract yet, if they're still in the exploration phase, I would see if you could throw your hat in the ring and partner with a company like Simple VMS or Go Ringo, one of those like sort of pseudo white label VMSs, and you actually offer the service yourself. If not, if they've already kind of signed, sealed, and delivered and they're working with that VMS, this is what I want you to do. Go talk to the team, your point of contact, and maybe the decision maker that decided to bring that VMS in, and try to find out why. Say, hey, what was going on with this situation that you decided you didn't like, that you wanted to bring a VMS in? What is the desired outcome? And do you have any benchmark metrics that you're going to be looking for the staffing partners to be hitting as part of this? And could you introduce us to the VMS directly so we can start building that relationship and maintain that quality of service, right? And then you ask the same questions to the VMS so you can get on good footing, build the relationship with the VMS, and then actually use some of Kim Henderson's practices that she's been talking about this at the summit this year, about how to actually grow your book of business selling through the MSPs and the VMSs of the world. So I know that's a deeper, hopefully a quick summary. Hopefully that was helpful, but cool. Well, let's keep rolling, David.
All right, now we got a giant topic here. So third strategy is improve your sales effectiveness, because you sort of mentioned it at the beginning. You know, we had a lot of good years. We lost our unique sales proposition, our unique value proposition, and now we got to look at our sales processes again. So anything you want to just kind of throw out as a nugget here?
I do. This is a huge topic, and I wish we could do a webinar just on this one alone, but I don't want to leave it untouched. So here's something that's really, really important. Here's some data to back this up. So as I mentioned, the old sales way was pick up the phone, call, send an email, and just kind of live there and manage your sales results out of just your traditional prospecting campaign. The efficacy of that alone has waned significantly. And if you're only going to rely on that, you're not going to grow and hit your goals. The main reason for that, outside of some distribution of labor through the pandemic and remote work and all that, the main reason is because buyers are being influenced before they're hearing from you. Okay. 85% of decision makers, C-suite decision makers on B2B services, which is staffing, have made their mind up or have been influenced by digital marketing, right? They're actually looking at what's online about you, your online reputation, what your website says, what your LinkedIn says, what your reviews are. They're looking at all of these things to decide, are you a potential solution for them? And what gets even crazier, I think it was Eric Gregg from Clearly Rated stated that 93% of decision makers will buy from a staffing agency that's on their day one list, okay? The day one list gets created before you make that first phone call or before you send that first prospecting email. It happens so far upstream right now in the marketing piece of it that we're going to talk about with funnels, that this is my best thing. This is my number one. If you take nothing else from today, this is the focus you should lean into this year: social selling. You need to make sure that your UVP and the messaging around it is getting out into the internet, that's reaching your target customers so they know about you before you get into the sales cycle.
I'm smiling because there's a bonus slide at the end here with a free ebook on social selling. So I'll leave it at that for now. All right. The other thing I want to mention on sales effectiveness is really looking at your sales process. And are you using the best practices, whether that's automating your sales funnel, whether that's integrating direct marketing, whether it's using automation platforms for client re-engagement. You mentioned kind of the drip campaigns, but do we have a process in place that helps our salespeople to be more productive? This question I asked our sales team this morning is, I said, we were looking at our priorities for Q1, and we use a methodology called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and the sales team didn't have any rocks for Q1. And so I said, okay, does that mean that there's nothing in the way of this sales team from ensuring you will achieve your goals this quarter? Because if there's something you think is getting in the way, then that needs to be a rock for us to work on. So what do you know? They came up with some things that we could work on, which was great because it told us, people working in particularly our marketing channel, where does the sales need help to be successful? Because they needed certain support things that they were missing. And having that question will help them to be more productive and have a higher success rate when they are both reaching out and trying to close deals. All right, let's go on to number 4 on this list. Now, this one I'm only going to put up as a bullet because we have a slide that shows what this looks like, but it's what Dan talked about, is that digital marketing world. If people are getting 75, 85% of the way down the pike of making a decision before they pick up the phone and are willing to talk to you, then what has happened in the online world has to win them over. And I'll show you a slide about that in a little bit, because we do have, I think, Dan, you mentioned it, this could be a full hour, and it absolutely could. We've done an hour on this. You're going to get a slide in about 2 minutes, in just a few minutes.
Love it.
All right, this one I do want to ask you about. So another strategy is increasing your focus and really concentrating on solving problems. So how can you sell more by focusing more?
Yeah, and my quote for this one is specialists get paid more than generalists. Okay. So, and what I mean by that is if you actually define what good is for your agency and the way that I do it, you've heard me talk about this, pick the top three industries that you're really good at filling roles in, and then look at those industries and pick the top three roles that you were the most successful at filling, meaning your time to fill, your fill percentage, and the gross margins within your target. And that creates the good criteria. Look at those right there, and then think about what companies need those positions. And then go back and look at all of your clients that you've satisfied by filling those roles and what is the benefit that they've received from it. Get testimonials about that benefit. Ask them like, hey, how important was it that I was able to fill these, fork truck drivers for you? What did you get from it? Start learning what that value is, right? So that when you increase your focus and you're selling only to really try to get those 9 roles brought into your company, you're going to do better at resource allocation. You're going to be able to speak a better lexicon or vernacular, and you're going to sound like an expert when you're talking to your prospect, getting these roles. But then most importantly, you're going to have real world social proof, testimonials from clients that you've solved this same problem before with your solution. And you can share that with your prospect and say, hey, this is how we help someone else out. This is what their life looks like now. It is really good. Their warehouse runs really, really smooth. They don't have a problem with retention, right? And that's how getting focused and learning how to connect that to the solution of your client's problems will help you it'll help you scale.
Yeah, one of the things you said that I really like is that you can become a greater expert at something by having more focus, which makes absolute sense. But what if you're in a small market where it's not big enough to focus? Well, then you might look at your sales team or your recruiting team and say, can we have people within our team become specialists? Can they become specialists in certain vertical markets? Can they
Yeah.
become specialists in certain job disciplines? Can they become specialists in certain size employers? Because if you think about your client base, you've got big clients, you've got small clients, you've got clients in various industries. Every one of those different roles you sell to, in every one of those different industries, they have their own language. They see the value of your services differently. And when your recruiters and your salespeople speak their language, it's so much easier to convey your value than when your team is trying to sort of speak the universal staffing language, which tends to commoditize what you're selling and tends to make people want to buy based on markups and price, because they're not seeing the value of the problems you can solve because you're not talking about those problems in their language. One of the things I love to recommend is that staffing companies spend a lot of time teaching their salespeople the economics of staffing. So I mentioned earlier, staffing could be used to reduce costs. Staffing could be used to improve productivity. It could be used to mitigate risk. Do your salespeople understand that? So if I'm selling to a manufacturing company, well, how am I helping them control costs? What does it mean that I'm helping them increase productivity? An example I love to use, if any of you sell to professional services organizations, when you have people on your staff that in professional services, your full-time employees, you measure their productivity rate, their billable efficiency. Let's say it's 50%, and let's say you had a person who's making $100,000 a year. Well, at 50%, that person's really only billing half their time. So they have to earn back that $100,000 in pay in half their billable hours. If they bring an outside contractor to do work, that person's billable 100% of the time. So they're double the productivity of the internal employee. So even if they cost more per hour, as long as it's not double the cost, they're actually more profitable than the internal employee. So you can start teaching your salespeople how to have these conversations so they can talk to your clients and say, hey, here's where we can help you drive your business outcomes because we really understand the problems that are unique to your industry, your skill discipline, your role. And the last thing is really, you're probably seeing more buying groups where you have people in different job titles making staffing decisions, and that poor salesperson has to know how to speak the language of everybody in the room. Dan, do you run into that where you have to kind of translate the value of staffing simultaneously to different buyers?
Yeah, you have to. And that's honestly really why we coach our salespeople to get really kind of niched down, right? We really want them to be focused in those areas that we're really good at, because then they only need to really learn the language of just a few key decision makers in that process. But they need to speak a little bit of finance and cost savings if there is a CFO in the room and the CFO has been more involved in staffing purchases the past year, right? They need to speak productivity and output to the operations manager. And they also need to speak cost of vacancy to like the HR people, right? And so you do need to speak that, but you got to train your people to that. But if you teach them and they can walk in sounding like an expert, they're going to be viewed as different than every other staffing salesperson that's walking in that door. And that's where you start to differentiate your sales process, like David was mentioning earlier. And again, once you do that, your salesperson sounds like an expert. They sounds like a specialist, and experts get paid.
Absolutely. All right, let's take the last strategy for growth. This one's find your X factor. So there's a guy by the name of Barrett Ursek, and I happened to hear him speak, and he talks about your X factor. And an X factor, the way Barrett describes it, is if you look at your industry and what are all the problems that are inherent to your industry, problems with the way people view your services, problems with um, managing the sales process, problems with how recruiting works, problems with the cost of labor. If you sat down with your team and say, let's look at all of the problems we have in sales and recruiting, or all the problems our clients have in sales and recruiting, and you make a list of all those things. And then you go back and you examine that list and you say, which of these problems are just our company? And which of these problems is the same issue every one of our competitors has? So let's say, for example, there's a perception issue with the quality of temporary labor. That's not just a problem for your company, that's a problem for the staffing industry. An X factor is when you identify one of those industry-wide problems and you find a way to solve it. The example Barrett gave that he grew his company on is he was in the lawn fertilization industry, and it was in the early 2000s. And back then, the way you bid work is somebody would ask for a proposal, you'd drive out to their house, you'd physically measure their yard, you'd get back to them a few days later to a few weeks later with the proposal, and then you'd hope that they called you back to purchase. Took about 3 weeks for the sales cycle. What Barrett did, and this was before Google Earth, is he actually managed to somehow finagle a relationship with NASA because NASA had pictures of every property in his community. And he developed software that could measure the size of people's yards. So if you called and said, hey, I'm looking to have my lawn fertilized, he could give you an instant quote. That
Wow.
eliminating 3 weeks in the sales process and making an instant quote completely differentiated him from all of his competitors because he solved an industry problem. That was his X factor. So again, if you look at staffing and you say, from our customer's perspective, or from, even from our internal employees' perspective, what are all the things that are difficult, that create friction, that make us not want to use the service or make us not see the value of the service? If we can identify any of those and tackle them, that becomes an X factor, and that can give you a 7 to 10x competitive advantage. Anything you
I,
want to add on that one?
I do, and I'll keep it short and sweet because I know we're up against the time. But I love that, and the fact that you pointed to speed as the example makes a ton of sense because speed is one of the three value drivers that you can sell on, right, as your X factor. And it is one that has not been widely solved in our industry. So if you can actually figure out how to get your people to your client faster, they will appreciate that because that will allow them to deliver their product or service to their customer even faster. And that's what the market is constraining them against right now. More buyers are buying on speed. So that could be your X factor. And there's enough technology out there right now and recruiting expertise to really increase the speed that we can actually place people with. So that's one that I would absolutely look at in your companies this year.
All right, so we are going to move on now. We're going to look at a few other areas. I promised a slide on digital marketing, and I told you this is an hour that you're going to get 2 minutes on. So I'm going to put up everything at once. But before I show up the diagram, what you're thinking about with digital marketing is how do I have a system that helps people find us, that makes people want to engage with us, that creates the right positioning, and then gets people to take action. Here it comes. All right. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. You think about your website, it's the center of everything that you're doing. And on your website, it's going to be filled with or should be filled with content. Actually, Dan, we just looked at a lot of the websites we host. And we wanted to see when was the last time people posted a blog, because we're seeing a lot of people who are saying, oh, I don't know how
Oh
blogging
man.
drives sales. Well, the vast majority, more than two-thirds of the sites hadn't posted one in the last year. So what does that mean? Their site's not being updated. It's not relevant. That hurts with SEO. You see that on the screen. That also hurts with showing that you're up to speed on what's going on in your industry, on what's going on in staffing and recruiting, because you're not sharing anything new. Your website's just a brochure. So content is the key to a digital marketing system because it starts on your website, but then it gets pushed out to other things like social media, pushed out through email, pushed out through referral sources. Dan and I are working together here, sharing ideas. It's not directly on our website, but for both of us, this will become web content. And
Yeah.
we each get greater distribution by sharing things with referral sources. You can
Yep.
do paid advertising. I mean, LinkedIn makes it super easy to get very highly targeted when you're going after employers, but you need something good to offer them to bring them to your site. Search engine optimization. We all want to be number one when somebody's Googling us. Again, it's content more than anything else, more than any technical wizardry. It's content. And now that's even changing. Is not only do you have to win with Google, but you have to win with all the AIs so that you show up as an answer when people are searching for information, that the AI is using you as part of the answer. There are SEO techniques to do that. Again, we don't have an hour to get into that today. And then you want to bring people back, because one of the things we learned is somebody who comes back to your website, whether it's a client or a candidate, is twice as likely to take action. So we're doing it with either automation platforms or retargeting ads so that people who come to our site are going to come back. So that was a digital marketing system, 1 hour in 2 minutes. If you'd like a longer version of that, you can check out the Lunch with Haley website, where you probably signed up for this event. Search for digital marketing and you'll find a full hour on that topic. Dan, anything you want to throw in here, what you see clients doing with this?
I do. Actually, one thing, if anyone caught my session with Staffing Hub on Tuesday, we talked about the 4 pillars of recruiting that really build out the UVP of a staffing agency. And it was like obviously your job board strategy, your referral campaigns, database, talent network, that kind of stuff. But one of the ones we didn't get into is this right here, the CRO. Most agencies do not do a good job of this. So this could be an X factor. If you do a really good job of driving candidate traffic to your website and getting them to engage with you, and then the ones that bounce, which is going to be a bigger percentage, that's just the data. If you can actually retarget them and bring them back to your site, second time site visitors, and David, you can fact check me on this, second time site visitors are more likely to take action on your website and apply than first time site visitors. So there's a massive gap that most agencies are getting wrong. And if you can nail this bucket, this is one of the 4 pillars or 4 quadrants of an effective talent network plan. So this is a big one. And then the same thing is replicated on the client side. But yeah, go follow David's link on that to learn more about it, because that's a whole other training session
Yeah,
in itself.
we're going to talk a little bit about CRO in a minute, but that stat, actually, we measured it. And as particularly on the talent side, a candidate who comes back to your website a second time is twice as likely to apply to a job. So if you think about what you're spending in job advertising and you could double the response rate by bringing candidates back, you'd save a ton on what you're spending in ads. But people spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in some cases, millions of dollars on job ads and next to nothing on candidate retention, getting them to come back.
Yeah.
All right. So before we get to the CRO stuff, we're going to talk a little bit about sales funnel automation. And I'm really interested in your take on this. This is looking at how to maximize your opportunities. So we're going to talk about why sales funnels are needed. I'm going to quickly go through essentially a truism in sales. So when I'm selling to a cold audience, I've got about a 3% chance that I'm going to actually hit someone who's buying. And maybe there's another 6 to 7% who are open to buying. But then I get to these big gaps, people who aren't thinking about it, people who just, they don't think they're interested, and people that if we were giving away free money, they wouldn't buy from us. Our
Where's that
sales,
line?
our
Where's that
sales
line?
team should be really focused up in the red. They're in the red zone. That's where they close the deals. The blue zone is where sales calls should be. They want to get people into the red, but the future sales, tomorrow's hot prospects, tomorrow's red zone are the people in the green. And this is where we're seeing very few companies, particularly in a slow market, want to invest anything into future sales because they want the instant wins. When we're talking about sales funnels, which we'll show you in just a second, the sweet spot is the green to the blue. And Dan, I know you wanted to mention that, targeted sales campaigns are the blue to the red.
Yeah. And the reason I wanted to shout this out, because I think there's this misnomer in our industry that marketing has to be different than sales. They kind of work in silos. And I think sometimes most staffing agencies in our industry haven't they haven't crushed marketing. And I will tell you, it's probably best just to outsource it to an expert. And I'm not saying that because I'm on Haley's podcast. I've been down the road of trying to do it internally. It is one of those tools inside that's just better to outsource it to experts. But you have to make sure that you're actually overlapping the marketing, kind of the funnel management with your targeted prospecting campaign. Because as David mentioned, tomorrow's customers start in the green, but the way they get from the green to the blue is through managing your sales funnel and doing digital marketing and social selling. That gets them into the blue. And if you do it really, really well, it will actually feed your targeted prospecting campaigns with warm leads. And that's why I wanted to show it this way, to show there is the overlap. And that's how sales and marketing need to work together.
Yeah, let's take it a step further. Like if you look at the sales funnel, people go from just, you have to create awareness. You have to let them know you exist. Then you have to get them interested. And why should they talk to you when there's 25,000 staffing companies in the United States and probably 2 to 500 in whatever city you're in? Then you get them to actually evaluate your services, to benchmark you against the competition and their current vendors to the point where they're going to decide, yeah, it's time to bring in a new staffing partner. Then you get just on the approved vendor list, because then you actually have to win them over once you're approved. Now we have to get them to try you, and now we have to deliver on our service promises to get them to come back and make repeat purchases and grow that relationship. Hopefully to get to be, Dan mentioned, to get to that preferred vendor status. And then best of all is a strategic relationship where they view you as an essential part of their organization. So when you think about the sales funnels we were looking at, the sweet spot again is the green and the blue. And the targeted campaign starts up in the green, goes all the way through, and you've got, Dan, you put it in here going through the red. I would argue it goes all the way through the yellow at the bottom as well.
So here, and I should have added this one too, David. The reason I stopped it there is because once you actually kind of get into that repeat purchase, preferred vendor, strategic relationship, that's actually not your targeted prospecting campaign anymore. That's your account management strategy. Like we were talking about earlier, your upsell, cross-sell, retain. So that would be another bracket down in the yellow, that there should be a strategy within your company to manage that, to basically get that repeat purchase by asking, are there other orders? By doing so well that you become preferred vendor, and then ultimately you start working on that retention strategy with your QBRs, your annual business reviews, that kind of stuff, that you become that strategic partner that has a strong strategic relationship. So, but yeah, that's why I stopped that bracket there, because that's where account management takes over.
Makes complete sense. So again, just to kind of wrap it up here, when you think about the sales funnel, you want to think about, do we have a solid game plan in the green section? And that's going to mostly be marketing and thinking about offers that hook people, that make them want to come in and want to learn more about you. Does the sales team then know how to take that into the blue and into the red zone? Are they really good? Do they have the support they need to close the business so that your win rate is really high and that they're also spending the majority of their time in that red zone? All right.
I
So,
know we're at the time. Can I mention one last thing about
of
that last
course.
slide, David? So with that last slide, if you see, again, the overlap between marketing and targeted prospecting, there's one thing I have to call out you have to be aware of, and this is where alignment and sales enablement is an absolute must now. When you start calling a prospect and start emailing a prospect, what are they going to do? They're going to look you up. And they need to see the stuff that your funnel management, your digital marketing is actually saying about you, to reinforce why they should pick up the phone the next time, why they should respond to your email, or why they should schedule a meeting. So those two things are like this flywheel effect. Once you initiate targeted prospecting, it will trigger them to look you up, and your digital marketing needs to be on point.
All right, let's talk about actually automating this process, because we want to get people from the green down to the red. We want our salespeople spending their time in the red zone. So what do we do? Number one, you got to identify that ideal client. Who do we really want to sell to? The ICP stands for ideal client profile. What does that business look like? What size? What location? What industry? Within that company, who are the relevant decision makers we want to sell to, and how do they look at the staffing decisions they need to make? So the more we know about our ideal client, the easier it is to get them to respond. Then we want to target those potential buyers. Well, what is going to make them respond? What's the issues that they're dealing with? What are their problems? What are their interests? How do they typically view staffing vendors? Because the more we know about that buyer persona, the easier it is to create something in the green and the blue that's going to make them take action. Then you also want to map your buying process. What do customers go through when they're evaluating your services? And then you can think about, do we have enablement content? Does our sales team, that's a fancy marketing speak way of saying, do we have good stuff sales can use that makes us look better than the competition? This is where you're differentiating your sales process. Is it an experience buying from us that makes people say, wow, these people have their you know what together? I really want to work with them? Or do you come in and you sound like, well, they kind of sound like every other staffing vendor. So again, what's their markup? Then you start to go to the automation. Once you've mapped this all out, you've thought about the touch points, you thought about what you want to say, you thought about how to engage people, you build the sequences or the flows that you can use for initial outreach, that you can use for follow-up, that you can use to nurture relationships. And you track all the sales engagements. Where do we get responses? Is it happening on LinkedIn, email? Is it happening when we pick up the phone? Is it happening when we drop by? What's working? What can we do more of? What's not working that we need to then go modify? So very high level, when you think about sales funnel automation, you can build all of this into software product, a HubSpot, an Apollo. If you have leads in your ATS and you have Sense or Bullhorn automation, you can do it there as well. The HubSpot and Apollo are really ideal tools when you're doing cold leads that they're not in your ATS yet. Jen, anything you want to add on the automation?
No, I think you covered it, man. I really want to get into CRO, which I know is coming up next, because that's going to be really important. Once you get people to the site, how do you actually keep them there and engage?
You got it. All right. So lead tracking and conversion optimization. We want to make the most of every opportunity. And you mentioned it earlier, somewhere between 60 and 90% of the people coming to your website disappear. They're silent. They don't do anything. They don't take an action. They just come and they go, and you don't even know they were there. So this little diagram is kind of an overview of what we're trying to do. First are the drivers. Who's coming to your website and why are they coming? What's bringing people to you? They're looking for something. Maybe it's an answer to a question. Maybe it's information about your services. Maybe it's some general information related to hiring or other workforce management challenges they're having, but they're coming to your website for a reason. The hooks. What on your site gets people to take action? Are there offers you're making? Are there services that you're showing that don't look and sound like everybody else? Is there an opportunity to engage with you at some level from the website? People are going to get to being about 60 to 75% of the way to a purchase based on what they've done with you on your website. And
Yeah.
then what are the barriers, the things that get in the way of people taking action? Does your site take too long to load? A slow performing website will drive people away. But the
Yeah.
biggest barrier really is a lack of clarity. People come to your website and they can't find what they're looking for because the language isn't clear. We haven't told them what we want them to do. We don't have good, strong, easy to follow calls to action. So Dan, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this area because it's a hot button of yours. So let's hear.
So I only got one tip on this, but it's the next slide that I really want people to learn about because I feel like there's a kind of a mysticism around this. When it comes to this, the best way to really look at it is go try your website. Go act like a job seeker, go apply, go act like a client, go engage with it and see what that experience is really like. If you've not done that lately, go do it again. And it needs to be quick. Literally think about what we're used to in our everyday consumerism. We go to places like Amazon or Target or Walmart or wherever online, and we expect to be able to find what we want quickly. We want it in stock and we want it delivered on our doorstep in 4 hours, right? People are literally paying crazy Prime memberships just to get an extra day head start on it. So just go see what that journey's like. But David, I want you to really cover this for the people because you know this better than most. But most people don't really understand what web tracking looks like and how it can be a lead for a sales team or for recruiters.
Yeah, there's software out there now that we can start to identify these silent visitors. So, what happens is you put some code about this tracking into your website, and you can even track different pages. So it starts to identify who's coming to your website. Now, we don't know their name yet because they have not self-identified, but these companies, the vendors that provide this software, they have databases. They can look at the IP address, the location of where someone's coming from, and they can correlate it back to companies. Sometimes they can correlate it back to individuals. About 35% of the people who come to your website that don't self-identify can be identified at a minimum by the company they work for, and in some cases, specific individuals. Companies like Apollo, they have lead tracking built into their platform, so they can identify the companies pretty clearly. And then they have buyer personas that you create that says, okay, if my buyer persona is an HR manager and somebody from ABC Manufacturing was on the website, now let's go find the contact record for the HR manager at ABC Manufacturing. It's highly likely that it was that person or someone in their department who was visiting. So we will do proactive outreach to the relevant decision makers who came from that particular organization. So some lead tracking can get down to the name of the person, but about 35% of it, we can get to at least the company. And we can automate the outreach. There are now even AI agents that can do automated follow-up to see, do we have somebody that's really a prospect? And if so, let's kick it back to sales. So is it, will this figure out everybody? No. But if you can take the 60 to 70 to as much as 90% of people who never self-identify and identify a third of them, that's a ton. You're talking about hundreds, in some cases, thousands of additional leads every single month for your team.
Yeah. Yeah. And when sales is as challenging as it is right now, every little bit helps. But you mentioned about some of the AI tools, David. Let's talk about this because this is a whole other thing in and of itself.
Yeah, we got
And
we have 4 minutes. I know we both said, there's no way we're going to get to even to this slide before the end. But so what we did is rather than trying to get into a deep dive on how staffing companies can use AI, um, I asked ChatGPT for some help because I figured it would know how to use AI, but even better than we do. And so these 25 ideas, which we're not going to cover, but Dan, I'll let you highlight anything what stands out to you, are ways to use AI in staffing within a within a staffing organization. Basically, we did some training of ChatGPT on what a staffing organization needs to do. We asked it for what AI tools to recommend and how to use them. And this is the headlines of what ChatGPT recommended back to us. Dan, anything jump out here for you?
yeah, my favorite one is sales training. You can actually train a custom GPT way easier than you think to act just like your ideal client. You can preload it with the typical objections that you get, and then you can have your salespeople work with these, these bots to go through role practice. They can practice sales meetings, they can practice cold calls, they can practice even emailing back and forth, and it will really help them hone their skills before they're really practicing on real customers. So it's a great way for managers to see where the pitfalls are and coach your people up. So it's a great way to use sales training.
Yeah, one of my favorites is to use the AI to have a conversation and to say, tell me what you know about X. And if I was trying to sell to somebody in this particular company in this particular circumstances, and you were coaching me, what would you tell me to do? And if you need more information, ask me questions so that you can give me an expert opinion and ask me questions one at a time. And I've done this where I've had ChatGPT just quiz me about things. And even just the questions really help me frame my thinking. But then it comes back with recommendations based on what it asked me. Instead of me asking the I let the AI be the coach and ask me. It's a kind of a reverse way to use the AI. And it's been so powerful for me personally to get better output by letting the AI guide the discussion.
Yeah.
All right, and with apologies because I know we only have a couple minutes left. We're not going to go into all of these because this is not an AI in staffing. I will do a little plug. Next month, our lunch with Haley, Brad Smith, who is our chief strategy officer and has been doing a lot of AI work with our team, will be going into a lot of the use cases of AI in staffing. So you can go to lunchwithhaley.com and sign up for next month's webinar, and we'll be getting into some of these areas.
Awesome.
All right, with our last 2 minutes, it's time for the lightning round. So, quick ideas for selling to wrap things up. And then we've got some goodies at the end, so don't sign off as soon as we're done. Okay, I'll take this one. We'll just go back and forth. I like turning alumni into clients. All those people you placed the last few years, where are they now? Use your recruiters, use your automation platforms, reconnect, see where they are now. Some of them may be candidates again for you, but some of them may have moved into buyer roles and could be a great opportunity to generate sales leads. Dan, I'll let you take this one.
So this is such a huge one, obviously, with the segment with skilled marketing. So again, this goes back to that niche, defining good. What are you really good at filling? Which roles are you good at filling? Start pipelining that talent and then reach out to those companies, obviously with the right person that can fill that role, but back it up with, hey, I noticed you're filling this position. These are typical challenges that companies like yours face with this vacancy. Here's somebody that could actually help fill this quickly and help you solve it this way. And that way you're pairing your messaging of your UVP with social proof with your skilled marketing and having a candidate present. And it's a great little tactic to use to get more business and placements.
All right, next one. Automate your assignment extension request, or at least get on the phone. There's this very, very low percentage that less than 20% of candidates get redeployed with the same staffing agency. So you don't want to lose your talent. So can we make sure that we're just using an automation platform to ask the hiring manager about assignment extensions? And if the assignment is really ending, let's start to proactively market those people to the next assignment.
This one I love, like forming a roundtable of your ICPs. Like literally, people love think tanks. They love masterminds. A lot of your ICPs will face the same challenges, and if you can actually bring them together to discuss those challenges and collaborate on solutions, and bringing in some outside experts, it will increase your credibility and kind of your expertise with your prospects. It's a great way to land them.
Next one, looking at tools and experiences that break through the clutter. Your sales process, we don't want it to look like everybody else. So map out what your competitors do, map out what you do, and then for each step in your process, say, how could we make this more memorable? What could we do differently? It could be a tool that you give your clients to use to make it easier for them to buy from you or to use staffing services, or just changing the experience of what it's like to be a staffing buyer.
Absolutely. And this is my big shout out. Create a social selling playbook for your BD team to follow. Like show them how to do social selling and then help them execute consistently. And it will be amazing what happens to your sales funnel.
And I'm going to let you take two in a row here because this is one of yours and I want to make sure you describe it the way you want.
I love it, man. This is good. Like literally define what you're good at. Like look at the roles that you were the most successful at filling and start focusing on those areas. Put your targeted outreach there, put the messaging in your marketing and all the stuff we've talked about today. Put it around this and let the world know that this is what you're good at, that you're better than everybody else at. And just trust me, you will start to get leads. People will know you for what you're good at. And that creates an amazing market alignment that leads to more customers, more revenue, more margin, which is what we all want right now.
All right, and last but not least, craft your unique value proposition around your talent network process and sell that. Basically how you are able to get better candidates, provide that speed advantage that Dan mentioned earlier, provide better fit candidates because of the way you work with the talent community, because ultimately that's what people are buying, your access to talent and the quality of the fit, and then how that translates to value for their organization. So the more you have a distinct competitive advantage in accessing a specific type of candidate, the greater your advantage over everybody else who doesn't have that specialization. Dan, anything else you want to add here?
No, man, we're at time. I'd like to get onto the goodies for the people that have stuck around and earned it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for everybody who's made it to the end of the hour. And Dan, let's talk about a big event coming up next month.
Absolutely. I'm going to put the link to check out the agenda, but Staffing Sales Summit is the only event out there that's dedicated exclusively towards sales, business development, and what we talked about today, really growing your revenue, hitting your goals. It's an amazing lineup of the best speakers that you have in the industry. February 26th through 28th in Orlando, Florida, at Margaritaville for most of the country. It is a really good time to be in Orlando. It's an amazing, amazing event. I just dropped a link in the chat if you want to click that to see the full agenda, all of the speakers. We're going to be covering everything related to the modern sales process and how to execute. And I also just want to drop, if you're not already going and you want to register, Haley has actually stepped up in a big way and they have a coupon code I'm going to drop in chat as well. If you use that code right there, you can actually save a few $100s on your ticket because Haley understands the importance of salespeople getting trained the right way and hitting their goals and learning how sales and marketing work together. So they've really stepped up in a big way as being a founding partner to this.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. I've just got a couple of freebies to offer. So get your phones out. We have a new campaign that we're about to launch, 30 sales ideas in 30 days. So it's going to be coming out probably, I think, the end of next week. We're just sort of taking pre-orders right now. But if you're interested, you can go to haleymarketing.com/30 sales ideas, or you can take out your phone and take a picture of that QR code. and we'll be sending an idea a day for 30 days to help you drive sales. So you can get a sneak peek of idea number 1 right there. Next one, you mentioned social selling. We actually have an ebook that came out on that last month, and it's haleymarketing.com/social-selling-ebook, or you can use that QR code. And we take advantage of some of the best advice from our social media team about what you can be doing to get more of a response to the time and effort you put into social media. And last but not least, if you don't get our weekly newsletter, well, your Saturday mornings are not starting the right way. So once a week, we send out a relatively brief newsletter with one idea. It could be sales, could be marketing, recruiting, leadership, kind of whatever topics hit us along the week. I write a lot of those. They're a lot of fun, but a lot of really good information to help you drive success for your business. And so, everything you've seen at these QR codes, all freebies. All right, if you have questions, you can reach out to Dan at Staffing Mastery. We'll see you in February at the Staffing Sales Summit. If you have questions for us, please feel free to reach out. If you don't reach out, we will look forward to seeing you next month as we talk about AI and how we are using AI wrong, but really how staffing companies can get more value out of AI, specifically in marketing and selling. And you can reserve a seat at lunchwithhaley.com. All right, for all of us at Haley Marketing, thanks for allowing us to go a few minutes over. There was a lot of stuff today. And Dan, thank you so much for sharing an incredible amount of valuable nuggets throughout the last hour and 5 minutes.
I appreciate that. There was a chat that I think is worth answering really quickly. How do you share it with your sales team? That's what Connie Saunders wants to know. How do you share this? You're going to get this out to everybody so they can share it, right?
So on the Lunch with Haley website, there's a section that says Webinars on Demand. This will be there with the slides and the recording. Usually it takes us a day or two to get the recording there. The slides are already there. So just share lunchwithhaley.com and you go to the Webinars on Demand. You'll find this recording there.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you again, Dan. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us for today's Lunch with Haley webinar. Hope to see you again soon.